Welcome back to this week's GCN Tech Clinic, where we answer the questions you've been submitting using the hashtag AskGCNTech. Let's dive straight into our first question. First question is from Michael J. He says he has a recurring problem with an annoying creak coming from his crank area. It's in rhythm with his pedalling, so he's pretty sure it must be coming from one of those parts. He's also checked his seat post and his handlebar. Says he's removed, cleaned and re-greased his cranks, his chain rings, all the nuts and bolts, and he's even had his local bike shop take a look. But to no avail, still making this creaking noise. What could it be? Well, it sounds like you've checked quite a lot of things. The first thing that came to mind is that you should probably check your pedals. Quite often it's easy to overlook where the pedals attach into the axle. So just take them out, put a bit of grease on them and check they're tightened up correctly. Also, something that I had on my bike a little while ago is that it turned out the quick release was actually a little bit dry. So put a little bit of lubrication on that cam lever mechanism, and that could hopefully alleviate your squeaking. If not, I've got one little suggestion for you. It could just be your knees. So I don't know what I can do about that, unfortunately. On to our next question. Our next question is from Alex. Oh yeah, good username. He says, "Hi Alex and Ollie, I have a question about indoor trainers." Says he has a wheel-on smart trainer that he uses for Zwift and was wondering, would his power numbers be much higher or lower if he was using a direct drive turbo trainer such as the Wahoo Kicker? Is there a difference in accuracy, assuming that you've got them set up correctly? No, I don't think there's going to be much difference between them. They both calibrate, so they're both within a couple of percent of each other. The only difference really will come from the wheel-on smart trainer you have is really crucial to get that calibrated right. So if you don't do that every time you ride it, that's when you'll start to see a difference in power numbers. Many of the direct drive turbos automatically calibrate and there isn't actually anything for you to do. So if you calibrate them both correctly, there should be no reason that they don't read just the same. So you've got no advantage or disadvantage using a wheel on one compared to a direct drive. Next question in is from Michael Gruzda. Interesting name, not sure I said it right though. It says, if I swap an Ultegra 1128 tooth cassette for something a little bit more suitable for climbs, like a 105 1134, do I need to adjust the rear mech or the chain? Cheers. Yeah, so if you're going to switch to a larger cassette, such as the 34, you are going to have to adjust the B-limit screw on your rear derailleur. So that'll move your top pulley wheel lower down to make space for that larger cassette. And in terms of your chain, yeah, unfortunately, you're going to need a longer chain. You can't add links into your chain if you've already used it. So in that case, you're going to need to buy a new one and then make it the correct length for your bike. Right, next question in is from RaRaAV1S. Says, hi guys, love the show. Couple of chain questions. Firstly, does the quick link or missing link need replacing every time you open the chain? Secondly, when using a dry wax chain lubricant, is it meant to give a bit of a slight noise or should it be completely silent? Says there's making a bit of a noise, wondering if they didn't coat the chain enough. So on to your first part of your question first. The quick link, some of them are single use, so only use them once, and some of them are multiple use. That said, I've used the single use ones a number of times in the past and not had any issue whatsoever, although some people out there will say, use them just once, stick to that religiously, otherwise you run the risk of them breaking. But in my experience, that isn't a problem. On to the second question, which is about the dry wax lubricant. Sometimes when using a wax on your chain, it can be a little bit noisier than if you're using a sort of oil-based lubricant. But again, the little bit of noise isn't anything to worry about. And if you're unsure if you've put enough wax on there, we'll just put a little bit extra on and make sure you give it enough time to dry. That's sort of one of the key bits to using a dry wax lubricant, is putting it on and then letting it set correctly before you ride your bike. So try that, but if it's a bit noisier, don't worry. Next question is a bit of an interesting username here. I'll try my best. Konstantinos Valarios, who says, hi GCN, bit of a silly question. Can I ride my tubeless tyres without sealant? Let's say that I don't care for repairing a flat tyre. Yes, you can use your tubeless tyres without sealant, providing that they hold air correctly, because many tubeless tyres will require you to use sealant to help hold air correctly. But if they do, yeah, I don't see why you can't use it. You're only going to have the loss of the ability to seal some little punctures that otherwise wouldn't have been a problem for you. So if you want to do it, go ahead. I wouldn't recommend it, but if that's your thing, feel free. On to our next question, which is from Christian A, who says, I'm doing a long challenge through rough urban roads and considering using wider tyres, such as 42mm wide. But the roads are also littered with quite a lot of broken glass and all sorts of other debris like that. He says the thought occurred, aren't wider tyres technically more prone to punctures because the contact patch is much wider? Therefore, you're riding over much more surface of the road, increasing the likelihood of running over a puncture by some of that debris or glass. God, I don't know how we're ever going to be able to prove that. And I've certainly seen no science or research into wider tyres going over more surface area and picking up more debris. But I do kind of get the thinking and theory behind this. My advice, or what I would do, is just use the wider tyres. I wouldn't worry about it. If it really bothers you that you've got an increased likelihood of punctures, use the narrow tyres if you want to. But I've never seen any such science or testing that a wider tyre punctures more easily than a slightly narrow one. So go for the wide tyre if it was me. On to our last question for this week's GCN Tech Clinic, and that's from Total Loss. Okay, says, recently I bought my first carbon bike. Should you be worried about using a bike repair stand when compared to an aluminium tube because the carbon ones could be bent or crushed quite easily? Should they only hold the bike by the seat post? They're a bit nervous because some of the stands they've used are only suitable for clamping around rounder tubes, whereas the tubes on their bike are angular. So, yep, go-to thing for your first carbon bike, never ever clamp the tubes of the frame in your bike repair stand. You do run the risk of crushing the tubes very easily. They're not designed to be clamped with that sort of force going around them, so you do run the risk of damaging your frame. You've already answered your own question really in terms of the best bit of advice I can give is to clamp the bike via the seat post because that is a particularly strong part and will resist that clamping force of the bike holder. So just make sure you clamp it on the seat post and don't ever clamp the frame. That's unfortunately it for this week's GCN Tech Clinic. Hope I've answered your question and it's been helpful for everyone. And if you've got a question you want to know the answer to, we'll get it in the comments section down below using the hashtag AskGCNTech. And well, we'll try and get to them next week. See ya.